Hello everyone, welcome to Options with Doug, streaming live on Monday, Wednesday, and now Friday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time on Bookmap Discord and the Bookmap YouTube channel. Before I get started, I need to go through the disclosures. General disclosure, all Bookmap Limited materials, information, and presentations are for educational purposes only and should not be considered specific investment advice nor recommendations. Risk disclosure, trading futures, equities, and options involves substantial risk of loss. It is not suitable for all investors. Past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results. Here's my contact information. The best way to get in touch with me is through Discord. My name on Discord is Doug P. Also in Bookmap Discord, there's an Options-Doug chat channel. You can post questions, comments, and content related to the topics of my presentation and the topics of the channel that I'll go through in just a moment. I'm also on X. My name there is @DougPless. Do have one announcement. The Bookmap Blue Jacket competition for February is going on now, and the idea is to show your trades in Bookmap. So you trade in Bookmap, open up the trade control panel, take a trade in Bookmap, and this can be either live, simulated, or replay. Mark up your screenshot, take a screenshot, mark it up, use the hashtag #FreeBlueJacket to win a blue jacket and Bookmap Global or Global Plus subscription with data. You can scan the QR code for more information. Here are the key tenets to my approach to trading. I believe that options trades and market maker hedging activity are key drivers of price in many stocks and futures. That certainly applies to large cap tech stocks like the Magnificent 7 stocks, as well as the equity index futures like the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq 100. And we'll take a look at several large cap tech stocks and the equity index futures today. And for the S&P 500, SPX is the underlying index, SPY is the ETF version of the index, and the ES futures contract is a derivative of SPX. And when traders buy and sell puts and calls in SPX and SPY, market makers take the opposite side of the trades and they hedge their delta exposure with the ES futures. And for the Nasdaq 100, NDX is the underlying index, QQQ is the much more liquid ETF version of that index, and the NQ futures contract is a derivative of NDX. And just like the S&P 500, when traders buy and sell puts and calls in NDX and QQQ, market makers take the opposite side of the trades and they hedge their delta exposure with NQ futures. The focus of my presentation today and the focus of the Options-Doug chat channel is options order flow, the impact of options markets on stocks and futures, and the influence of market maker hedging flow on price action. I have a two-step process for trading, and the first is planning. And I use positional analysis. I look at how traders and market makers are positioned in the options market and how those positions change from day to day to develop a thesis regarding expected trading range and volatility for the day as well as their directional bias. And the second step in my process is execution. I look at real-time order flow in Bookmap and real-time market maker hedging flow in Spotgamma Hero to confirm my thesis and for setups. And when I talk about setups today, I will be focusing on an underlying asset. Setups in that asset can be taken with futures contracts, shares of stock, or options, depending on the asset as well as the way you like to trade. And I will go through both of these steps today. Questions and comments are welcome, and I will be watching both the Options-Doug chat channel as well as the chat and YouTube for your questions and comments. Please feel free to post. I'll do my best to answer your questions. Here's my agenda for the day, Monday, February 23rd. First of all, I want to go over news items, economic data, events, and earnings for the week. Then I'll go through my positional analysis. Then I'll review some setups earlier today. Then I'll take a look at the live market. And when I get to the live market, if anyone has any stocks they want me to take a look at, please let me know, and I'll be glad to do that. All right, let's get started. And let's start with news items. So I'm sure everyone is aware of news, last Friday and then over the weekend. So on Friday, of course, the Supreme Court ruled that Trump did not have the legal authority to impose tariffs using the Emergency Powers Act that he used. So later in the afternoon, President Trump held a press conference and announced 10% global tariffs. Then over the weekend, he increased that to 15%. So welcome to Trump tariff chaos 2026. So the markets apparently didn't like that over the weekend, and we'll talk about the reaction in both stocks and the equity index futures in just a moment. All right, so that was the news over the weekend. Let's go to news for today, for this week. First of all, economic data pretty light this week. There are Fed speakers throughout the week. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., consumer confidence, and then continuing on with data. On Friday, PPI data comes out at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. All right, probably the most important event of the week is earnings report from NVIDIA. And that is Wednesday after the close. So that's shown right here. And the expected move right now for NVIDIA is right around plus or minus 5.5%. Note also several software stocks are reporting earnings. They're CRM, Snowflake, Trade Desk, and of course the software stocks have been beaten down relentlessly for months now. And we'll take a look at Snowflake today, and it's taking a beating again today. There's no end to it. All right, so that is what's coming up for the week. Again, one key data release on Friday, PPI data, and then one key earnings report, NVIDIA, after the market close. And we'll see if NVIDIA is still the most important stock in the market. All right, so let's move on to positional analysis. And I'm going to start with the S&P 500. Let's take a look at the ES futures and Bookmap. And some reactions at key levels today. Primarily SPY levels. So this was just after the open. A reversal at the SPY 690 absolute gamma strike volatility trigger, and that was to 690 to the tick, 690.00. And that set up a great short down to almost the SPY 680 large gamma 3 level. And there are also some key SPX levels. There's the 6900 level, and that has been resistance. We'll take a look at that in just a couple minutes. Been resistance in the last week or so. And then this is the line is on the same line as the SPX 6850. That is the ES lower daily expected move. And again, SPX 6850. All right, before I spend more time on this chart, let's step back. Let's take a look at our higher time frame. I'm going to go to the SPX, the underlying index, and take a look at a 1 year, 1 day chart for SPX. And what this shows, the rally that began last year in April has really run into a zone of consolidation this year, somewhere between 6,800 and 7,000. So let's take a look at that. Let's go to a 30-day 1 hour chart. So this is the SPX, again, 30-day 1 hour chart, showing the zone for the last 30 days, somewhere between 6,800 and 7,000, although SPX recently has been making lower highs and lower lows, and has the lower lows have broken down below that 6,800 level. And then most recently, resistance at 6,900, and that is the volatility trigger today. So SPX is trading down below its volatility trigger. All right, so let's take a look at some of these levels. I'm going to start with the expected moves. These are based on the options market, based on the closing price for SPX from Friday. And the dashed purple lines are showing the lower and upper weekly expected move. Again, based on the options market, based on the closing price for SPX from Friday. These levels remain in place for the entire week. And then the dashed blue lines are showing the lower and upper daily expected move. Also based on the options market, based on the closing price for SPX, again from Friday. Those levels change every day, and I do post the updated expected moves every day, the day before, in the Options Doug chat channel and Bookmap Discord for SPX, ES, and NQ. So it looks like SPX did trade down below the lower day the expected move today, and is now, looks like it has just recovered that level. All right, those are the expected moves. Again, I post those in the Options Doug chat channel and Discord. Let's take a look at the Spotgamma levels on this chart. I'm going to start with the put wall. I'm going to go through the key daily levels. First of all, the put wall remains at 6,800. That's the strike with largest net negative gamma that can be expected to act as support. The next level up is the volatility trigger. Again, key level for today. That is Spotgamma's proprietary volatility and gamma flip level. Below that level, market makers' position on the gamma curve is negative. In a negative gamma environment, market makers have to trade with price to hedge their delta exposure, and that tends to enhance or increase volatility. And that certainly helped to fuel this move lower this morning, this negative gamma. We'll take a look at a picture of that in just a minute. So above that level, market makers' position on the gamma curve is positive. In a positive gamma environment, market makers have to trade against price to hedge their delta exposure. That tends to subdue or decrease volatility. And SPX is definitely a negative gamma today. Again, we'll take a look at a more up-to-date picture of that in just a moment. Next level up is the, Next level up is the 7,000 level. That is the call wall, and now in the absolute gamma strike. So the call wall is a strike with largest net positive gamma. It can be expected to act as resistance. And it did move down from 7,100 on Friday to 7,000 today. And then that is also the absolute gamma strike. That's a strike with largest absolute positive and negative gamma. So that's where most of the gamma-weighted open interest is concentrated. All right, shifts and levels for SPX. Volatility trigger shifted slightly higher, 10 points higher. And then more significantly, the call wall shifted down from 7,100 to 7,000, even with the rally on Friday. So that's the range. Put wall at 6,800. Call wall at 7,000, marking that range that has been in place for about 30 days, really since the beginning of this year. All right, let's wrap up our view of SPX with a 1-minute chart. So there's SPX. Key resistance the last few days, 6,900, which is the volatility trigger today. SPX did break down below its lower day they expected move. Found resistance at that level, is now trading up above, and it is testing that level from up above. And here's the put wall down at 6,800. So if SPX continues to break lower, that's the next natural target at 6,800, the put wall. All right, let's take a look at SPY. Then we'll get back to Bookmap, get back to ES. SPY, again, I pointed out reaction at key levels. So I pointed out resistance at the 690 absolute gamma strike volatility trigger just after the open. And note that was the high last Friday, 690.06. So that level acting as resistance. Oops. So let's zoom in. All right, great entry point for short. Again, the 690 level. Additional entry points at the 688 zero gamma level. Couple tests of that level from below. Break down below the 685 level. And then SPY has not quite made it down to the 680 level. All right, for SPY, the only level that changed was the volatility trigger shifted higher to 690. So again, that was the key resistance today. All right, now to Bookmap. So again, I have SPY levels on this chart, SPX levels, and key ES levels. SPY 690, 688, zero gamma level. Both of these levels, nice entry points for short. 687, round number level, short. 685, another entry point, pullback entry point for short. Reaction at 683. Took a while, but that you could have gotten a couple of points out of SPY or 20 or so points out of ES. And we'll talk about setups in just a couple minutes. All right, so those are the levels, key levels reacting today. And just to point out, here's the 6,800 put wall down below. Again, if the S&P 500 continues to move lower, that would be the next logical level after the SPY 680 level. All right, note there is a difference in price between ES and SPX, and today that offset is right around 13 points, or somewhere between 13 and 14. Right now it looks like it's 13 and a half. I'm using 13. So I'm showing SPX 68.50 at ES 68.63. And I also, again, I post all the index relationships that I use every day, and that includes the ES to SPY relationship. So even if you don't use any of this at all for free, if you just go to my channel, Options-Doug chat channel, get the index relationships, or you can figure them out on your own. It's very easy. You can write a little script to do that. I've done that. And then you can show them on your ES chart. And price does react at SPX and SPY levels, ES, which is a derivative of SPX again. All right, so those are the levels in play. Let's take a look at Nasdaq. All right, Nasdaq underlying index levels are QQQ and NDX. I have those levels on this chart. And QQQ reaction right after the cash open reversal at 608. That's just a round number level. And down to and below the QQQ 600 absolute gamma strike put wall. Note NQ trading well down well below its lower daily expected move. And now it looks like finding a resistance at that level. and that is also the NDX 762 zero gamma level. All right, let's take a look at the underlying index chart so we can isolate these levels. Let's start with QQQ. Oops. Zoom in. All right, so note QQQ has not made it back up to its Friday highs like SPY, which was the 610 level for QQQ. There's the reaction at the 608 level. 606, 605, and those are just round number levels. And then finally, a breakdown to and below the 600 level, which is the put wall and the absolute gamma strike. And now QQQ trading up above those levels. All right, let's take a look at NDX. All right, Marge, sorry about the pronunciation. Does Hero work well for crude oil? And do gamma levels also work well with oil? So I don't think there are any gamma levels for oil. If you're talking about the futures, I think there may be gamma levels for USO. That's not something that I normally look at. So I would not use this approach to trading for crude oil. Sorry about that. It's I just have not looked at it, but I don't think there are any gamma levels. Certainly not for crude oil futures, and for USO probably not significant. Let's take a look at NDX. All right, NDX. Trading down below its volatility trigger at 810, 24,810. Resistance at the 24,762 zero gamma level. All right, back to Bookmap. And we'll talk about setups in just a moment. All right, so again, key levels. 608 on the upside, 600 and below on the downside. All right, let's wrap up our positional analysis by taking a look at gamma, and this will be a key to the price action today. So this is the Trace Gamma heat map by Spotgamma. This is available to Spotgamma subscribers. What this chart is showing is market maker's gamma position. And you can equate gamma with volatility. So positive gamma, again, we're looking for lower volatility with market makers trading against price. And then in negative gamma, we're looking for higher volatility with market makers trading with price. And that's what we see here. Negative gamma, bright red shading. Let's step back. Let's take a look at our higher time. Let's take a look at the beginning of the day. So I'm going to go back to the open. So you can see at the open, bright red shading, negative gamma down below, and then a little bit of blue shading, positive gamma up above. So let's step through. This is updated every 10 minutes, so we can step through time. 10 minutes. And note SPX is already reversed lower. Finding a resistance at the SPY 690 level. And then look out below in this bright red shading, negative gamma. This purple line here is the hero signal. And this is the S&P 500 equities hero signal. We'll take a look at that in just a minute. And that was definitely the signal to look at for the S&P 500 today. So we're stepping through time. as SPX falls through this negative gamma, with market makers selling as price moves lower. And it looks like right around 68.20 was the right around the low of the day so far. All right, so it looks like the S&P 500 is stabilized. But this was a great short in the morning, looking at all this negative gamma, anticipating such a sharp move lower. All right, so that's positional analysis, looking at resistance at the 690 level, negative gamma, sharp drop down below. And then the put buyers and call sellers took their foot off the gas and S&P 500 stabilized. So let's take a look at that. This is the S&P 500 equities hero signal. So this is available to Spotgamma subscribers. What this chart is showing is market makers. It's showing options trades and market maker hedging activity in the S&P 500 equities. That's all 500 stocks in the S&P 500 index. And this is definitely what was driving price today. So there are two hero signals that we can take a look at for the S&P 500. The first is the S&P 500 index signal, and this is showing options trades and market maker hedging activity for the S&P 500 index components. We've already taken a look at a couple of those, SPY and SPX, and it also includes ES and XSP. White line is price for SPX, and the purple line is the hero signal. Rising hero signal indicates traders are taking positive delta options positions, and a falling hero signal indicates traders are taking negative delta options positions. And in each case, market makers have to take the opposite side of the trades, and in the case of rising hero signal, for example, they have to buy ES futures to hedge their delta exposure. And this line was, I thought, not nearly as easy to read as this signal today. So this is what we'll take a look at, the S&P 500 equity signal. And this was what was really driving the market lower. So this is showing traders taking negative delta options positions from the open. So let's see what they were doing. The orange line shows calls, the blue line shows puts, and this is showing traders were selling calls at the open, driving price lower. So when traders sell calls, market makers buy calls, and they have to sell stock to hedge their delta exposure. Sorry about that. Auto zoom. All right, S&P 500 equities driving price lower. So let's go take a look at Bookmap now. So we know traders were selling calls from the open. Let's take a look at Bookmap. So there's a level just above the 690 level that I anticipate may act as resistance. Key levels for SPY, absolute gamma strike, volatility trigger. You can see that was tested a couple of times. The volume dots in Bookmap show market buy minus sell. Green volume dots indicate more buyers than sellers. Magenta dots, more sellers than buyers. And you can see after the second test of the 690 level, aggressive sellers start to come in and price moves lower as traders sell calls in the S&P 500 equities. And during this time, cumulative volume delta shown by the dark blue line as well as the sell stop orders were helping to fuel that move lower. In very convenient pullbacks, there's the 688 zero gamma level, 687 level, that's also VWAP, that light blue line, then more pullbacks, and you can see more magenta volume dots coming in as price moves lower and there are more sellers. All right, so that's the move lower this morning from 690 almost down to 680. I thought that was a very clear, clean setup, both in Bookmap and with Hero. All right, right now, yes, trying to move higher. We'll get back and we'll take a look at current price action and the S&P 500 in just a couple of minutes. So let's take a look at the Nasdaq now. We'll take a look at a couple stocks, and we'll get back to ES. So again, Nasdaq, similar pattern. Brief move higher at the open. QQQ 608 resistance. Let's zoom in on this. Sorry about all the zooming. All right, I have turned the round number levels back on for QQQ, so there are more lines in this chart, but the 608 level was a key level. So just like the SPY 690 level, there were a couple of tests to this. One more lower high. Aggressive sellers start to come in. Magenta volume dots. Cumulative volume delta moves lower. Sell stop orders. Deep pullbacks to 606. Lower high. Nasdaq continues to move lower. All right, let's see what options traders are doing. So let's go back to Hero. And the Hero signal to take a look at for Nasdaq today was the Mag 7 signal. So just like the S&P 500, there are two Hero signals that we can take a look at. First is the Nasdaq index signal, and pretty choppy. So this is showing options trades of market maker hedging activity. For the Nasdaq index components, we've already taken a look at those. That's QQQ and NDX. Then the other Hero signal that we can take a look at is the Mag 7 signal, showing options trades of market maker hedging activity for the stocks known as the Magnificent 7: Apple, Amazon, Google, Meta, Microsoft, Nvidia, Tesla. Those stocks make up a very large component of the Nasdaq 100 and often drive price, just like they did today. So just like the S&P 500 equities, traders were selling calls and buying puts, shown by the following blue line. Call sellers more in charge this morning, having a larger impact. Same with the Mag 7. So traders selling calls, market makers buy the calls. They have to sell stock to hedge their delta exposure, and those stocks being a large component of the Nasdaq drives Nasdaq lower. And note the sharp drop in cumulative volume delta and sell stop orders as price started to accelerate lower, down to the 600 level and down below. All right, that's Nasdaq. Any questions about the indexes? Both great shorts. I thought the S&P 500 was a little bit more clear with the resistance at the 690 level. All right, let's take a look at some stocks. Then we'll get back to the indexes. So first stock I want to take a look at. So we'll take a look at the several Mag 7 stocks, and then take a look at some other stocks and silver as well. All right, so there's there's Amazon and Bookmap. And Amazon, bearish opening drive. Let's take a look at Hero, see what options traders are doing in Amazon. And this is a bearish opening drive, traders selling calls just like they were in the Mag 7 stocks index in the indexes, S&P equities and Mag 7. Key target, 205 hedge wall, and Amazon sliced through that level. Looks like it found support a couple times, then broke down lower, then resistance at the 205 level. Oops, I'm looking at the wrong level. We'll go to Bookmap to take a look at the levels. A little bit hard to see here. All right, so anyway, traders selling calls, and they finally take their foot off the gas right around 10:10. And now Amazon is grinding lower. Let's go take a look at Bookmap. All right, so there's the 205 level. So that level, after Amazon broke down below, did act as resistance. And Amazon trading down below that level now, the 205 hedge wall. Note the rising cumulative volume delta. This is an indication to me that options traders are definitely in charge today. All right, so there's Amazon. Bearish opening drive, traders selling calls. All right, next stock I want to take a look at is Meta. Another bearish opening drive. Let's see what options traders are doing. Meta, call sellers again. Zoom on this, zoom in. Trader selling calls from the open. Flow alert, signal significant options activity, get your attention. Looks like a block order there, institutional order, selling puts. Did not have much influence on price, maybe a brief move higher. Just set up another entry point for a short as traders continue to sell calls. All right, back to Bookmap. Again, rising cumulative volume delta and falling price, good indication that options traders are really driving price. Let's go take a look at Hero. Note 650 hedge wall. And after Meta traded down below that level acted as resistance. Note also the high liquidity at the 5 and the zeros, 5s and zeros. These limit buy orders in the order book, and they act as a magnet for price. So some buyers coming in now at 638. So this is the heat map and Bookmap showing a history of limit orders in the order book. And Marge asks, do you say the gamma levels, Hero, etc., are correct about what percentage of the time? I really can't say. Here's how I approach looking at this. I assume that any spot gamma level, call wall, put wall, absolute gamma strike, hedge wall, volatility trigger, will act as resistance when tested from below or support when tested from above. And then I confirm that with, first of all, looking at hedging flow in Hero and then order flow in Bookmap. So I assume, that's what I think may happen, but then I want to confirm that with order flow in Bookmap and hedging flow in Hero. So I just don't take a trade blindly, assuming some percentage it may or may not work. So I hope that helps, but I don't really have any statistics about that. That would be pretty difficult to do. All right, so I hope that helps. All right, so there's Meta, bearish opening drive. All right, next stock I want to take a look at is Microsoft. So Microsoft is both a hyperscaler and a software stock, so a double whammy for Microsoft, and it continues to move lower. Again, rising cumulative volume delta. Falling stock indicates options traders driving price. And again, traders selling calls. Full alert comes in just after the open. Get your attention, traders selling calls. It looks like they finally took their foot off the gas right around 11:15, 11:30. And Microsoft consolidating now. All right, so Microsoft moving lower. Bearish opening drive driven by call sellers. All right, next stock I want to take a look at is Tesla. Another bearish setup, another Mag 7 stock, bearish setup. Go to Tesla. All right, in the case of Tesla, traders are buying puts, shown by the following blue line, and selling calls. Looks like call sellers were a little bit more aggressive in the morning. But this is a bearish opening drive and bearish momentum when the blue line and orange line are moving the same direction. Full alert comes in just after the open. Get your attention. Just after 11 a.m. Tesla broke down below the 400 put wall key gamma strike and still trades below that level. And it looks like the call sellers and put buyers took their foot off the gas right around 11:30. Tesla has moved a little bit lower, but really consolidating right now. So back to Bookmap. All right, so there's Tesla. Again, rising cumulative volume delta, but call sellers, put buyers in charge, driving price lower. And Marge asks, can you explain when you say when tested from above or below? All right, let's go back to Meta. All right, remember, Meta was we'll take a look at two examples. First of all, Meta, 650 hedge wall. When price breaks down below that level, then tested from below, I expect it to act as resistance. That's exactly what happened. That's the hedge wall. So the hedge wall and hedge wall for stocks, volatility trigger for indexes, I expect those levels to act as supportive resistance. The SPY 690 absolute gamma strike volatility trigger, I expected that to act as resistance. And then that was confirmed with order flow and hedging flow. And if you waited for a more conservative entry, there you are. Test of the 6,900 level. That's the SPX volatility trigger. Let's zoom in on that. Good question, by the way. So let's zoom in. All right, so this level, when tested from below, I expect it to act as resistance. That's exactly what happened. So moving forward in time here, I can see the aggressive sellers start to come in. Looks like S&P 500 did not quite make it up to the 6,900 level, but reversed lower. So you could have taken a short here or at the 688.0 gamma level, which was also tested from below, and aggressive sellers came in as traders continued to take negative delta options positions, selling calls in the S&P 500 equities. So hope that helps when tested from these or levels when tested from below, acting as resistance. All right, to Tesla. Again, short, bearish opening drive. Tone down the volume dots just a bit. And traders buying puts, selling calls, price moves lower, 400 put wall, key gamma strike. And now price is broken down below that, down to the 395 level. All right, next stock I want to take a look at is Snowflake. Snowflake, again, remember, reports earnings after the close on Wednesday, along with NVIDIA and CRM, Salesforce. Very bearish day in Snowflake as software stocks continue to get beaten down. All right, so let's take a look at Hero, see what traders are doing in Snowflake. I forgot to add that. Oops. And this is extremely bearish. Traders selling calls, buying puts. Bearish opening drive, bearish momentum. Looks like some larger traders sold some calls to buy puts. Or actually bought calls, bought puts. Sorry about that. Bought calls, bought puts. And then price, after that, did not have much impact on price, and Snowflake continued to move lower. All right, back to Bookmap. Bearish opening print, right around 170, and then a straight drop lower as traders continue to buy puts and sell calls. And let me check. So typically the universe of stocks that I like to trade are the hero stocks that have hero signals. So that's the hero signal is not available for all stocks. But in that list, it looks like I'm looking at another screen here, and a lot of software stocks at the top of the list of stocks moving down. MongoDB, CrowdStrike, Datadog, Zscaler, and Snowflake is down 7.8% since the open and over 9% for the day. All right, so that's Snowflake. All right, last stock I want to take a look at is silver. Of course, the silver ETF. And Nayat, Full Things, welcome, glad you're here. Sorry about the pronunciation. This is a very interesting video. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. Thank you for your kind words, and you're very welcome. Glad you're here. All right, silver pretty choppy, but bullish for the day. Let's see what options traders are doing in silver. All right, silver. This is a bullish opening drive. Didn't last very long, just about 10 minutes, or really even less, 7 or 8 minutes. Full alert comes in at the open as traders aggressively buy calls. They quickly take their foot off the gas, start selling calls. And silver chopped around for quite a while. That looks like some call buyers came in. And traders also buying puts. That's shown by the negative delta notional on the put line here. But it looks like silver started to move higher right around 12:45. Then some call buyers came in. So the main trade in silver was the bullish opening drive, shown right here. All right, any questions? Any more questions? All right, let's go back to the indexes. And if anyone has any stocks they want me to take a look at, please let me know. I'll be glad to do that. All right, back to the indexes. All right, ES definitely taking a turn down here. Not quite at lows of the day. Let's take a look at Nasdaq. And M4, here you go, ES. So I know questions are delayed in YouTube. So there's ES, NQ. Looks like it has also taken a turn down. We'll see if that holds. Back to ES. See if there's any trend line there. All right, so both ES and NQ really chopping up and down, making slightly higher lows and higher highs after the sharp drop this morning that lasted from 9:35 until 11:15. So let's go back. Let's check Hero now. See what options traders are doing. I'm going to shift back to the total signal. Let's check the S&P 500 index signal first. After making a peak right around 115, turned lower. S&P 500 equities doing a better job of driving price today. That is pretty flat. Check Nasdaq. Nasdaq index signal turning a little higher. Mag 7 signal. Not doing much right now. Go back to S&P 500 equities. All right, let's check Trace. All right, SPX continues to be in very negative gamma. Let's check Charm. This is going to show buying support and selling pressure due to time decay. Blue shows buying support, red shows selling pressure. Looking for potential pin targets, although this may not, is probably in negative gamma. I would not not necessarily do this. So let's go back to Gamma. Looking for more potential pin targets in positive Gamma rather than negative Gamma. And Marge asks, is it true that only the selling of puts and calls matter in relation to price? Since if you buy calls or puts, you don't have to execute. But if you sell, you must execute. How does that work in hero gamma levels, etc.? All right, so Marge, I don't really understand your question. Sorry about that. Sorry, I just don't understand. Maybe you could clarify. So the idea I'm talking about, options market makers. Let's take a look at a simple example here. Let's go to maybe Apple. All right, Apple bucking the trend today. Shift to puts and calls. All right, so the way this works is when traders buy calls, market makers sell calls. Sorry about that. When market makers buy calls, when traders buy calls, market makers sell the calls, they want to remain delta neutral. So selling calls, that's a negative delta position. They have to buy stock to offset that delta. So they want to remain delta neutral. And Nightful Things asks, do you use iceberg stops and CVD data in your Bookmap for trading? Yes, I do. So let's go back. So first of all, stops and icebergs are only available for CME futures, which includes ES and NQ. And they also use MBO data, market by order data, which is provided by Bookmap data and Rhythmic data. And I use Bookmap data, which again provides the MBO data. Bookmap takes that data and can determine order by order type, stops, and icebergs. So I'm showing stops down here in the subchart with a yellow line and iceberg orders with the blue line there. So what this is showing is traders were fading that move. Large traders use iceberg orders to hide their size. And this is pretty typical of large traders with iceberg orders. They will buy weakness and sell strength. So they fade the move. And typically I'm looking for cumulative volume delta shown by the dark blue line to confirm the move, higher or lower. And that's exactly what happened here. And note when cumulative volume delta slows down, that's when the S&P 500 starts to consolidate. And then also the stop order line slowed down as well. And note also the large traders stopped buying. So now all the lines are pretty flat. But yes, I do use stops and icebergs orders. It's not central to my approach, but it is definitely a part of my approach to trading the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq. And thanks for the question. Another good question. All right, so it looks like yes, maybe breaking down below this little trend line here. And the volume dots are very important, showing aggressive sellers. Those are market buy minus sell. Magenta dots indicate more sellers than buyers. Again, large traders fading that move with iceberg orders, so they are buying. That can help to slow down the drop. But cumulative volume, delta, and stop orders shown with the yellow line are moving lower. Let's check Hero, see what options traders are doing. Shift back to the total signal. Go to the equity signal. And that is moving lower as well, confirming the move lower. All right, everyone, my time is up. Thank you very much for watching, and thank you very much for your questions and comments. And I will see you on Wednesday. We'll talk about NVIDIA and some of the software stocks that report earnings after the close. All right, everyone, again, thanks. Have a great afternoon, and I will see you on Wednesday. Bye.